Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. Well, here we go again. Some may say that it's winter season, but it apparently is measles season, at least in South Carolina. You know, it's that time of the year where we're going to hear the same old saw that you are supposed to wear a raincoat to keep other people dry. Yeah, you've heard that one before, haven't you? Well, you have if you've been listening to this channel. And let's take a look here. We have seen the mainstream media merry-go-round and one state senator, Josh Kimbrell, stirring up some new hogwash. Here, it kind of is like the cooties days. I hate to inflict any PTSD on y'all, but remember this, where there were the daily tallies of cases. Of course, they never told us how those cases were tallied up, but we were supposed to be afraid, very, very afraid. And now we've got headlines. Measles is spreading fast in South Carolina. Here's what it says about vaccine exemptions. We're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at how deadly are the measles really? How deadly is the measles vaccine? And we're going to be looking exactly at Josh Kimbrell, some scandals he's associated with, and how he is trying to cover his how do I put it delicately, his tracks after stepping in it, so to speak. We'll take a looky down here. Measles exposure reported at upstate Walmart. Well, I don't know about you, but whenever I see Walmart making the headlines in the mainstream media merry-go-round, I pretty much can guarantee that it's another story of the week. And my hogwash meter has been activated. What say you? So let's take a look at this latest measles mongering. You've heard of fear mongering. I call it flu mongering. And who would have thunk? It's coming out of good old Republican, conservative South Carolina. And that is exactly why they're doing that. Just like they're having all of the bang bang events occur in places like, oh, I don't know, Texas, Utah, probably Florida will be next on the docket, because these are the states that allow you to have your constitutional right to protect yourself, your property, and your family. So why not have a measles outbreak in South Carolina, you ask? Well, let's take a look at some of these headlines here. Oh my gosh, they really are going overboard. Measles exposure reported at South Carolina Walmart. Was this person at the Walmart? I don't understand. 124 new cases since Tuesday. Health officials, I don't understand. Is this written by AI? Health officials, 13 of those infected are vaccinated. They meant to say, I think, health officials say that 13, there's your lucky number, of those infected are vaccinated. Well, hang on. Let's camp out here for a moment. So you're telling me that the state senator, as we're going to see in a moment, Josh Kimbrell, is calling for the school districts and the state to, how does he put it delicately, review exemptions for these vaccines, because you have to balance your own personal rights and liberty and freedom against those of the public good. Well, who gets to define the public good? But then on the flip side, they're telling us that these individuals that got infected are vaccinated. That's going to pop up in this story again. It's very strange. You're telling me, well, I'll get to that in just a moment. Let me share the next. I've got a couple of slides here for you that I put together. Remember, I don't use AI. This is my own research, my own images, and the digging that I've done today to put this story out here for you. So 2 South Carolina colleges confirm measles cases on campus. Well, it gets even worse, friends. Worst is worse than worse. Take a look at this. The individual affiliated with the university, what does that mean, affiliated? It's someone who works there. Is it a janitor? Is it a delivery person? They tested positive. Gee, that sounds like the good old cooties days, when all of these tests that didn't really test for anything because there was nothing for the test to test for. And here we're told that the person is isolating. Do you see what they're doing? They're reinforcing this idea of the isolation. What comes up next? Contact tracing is underway. And of course, you should do it for your fellow man. 98% of Clemson students have provided required proof of immunity. And then look at the image back here. Are we supposed to think that COVID is now the measles? Doesn't that look like the graphic that some artist came up with for COVID? I'll have to see if we're going to get a color coded operation on this as well. I'm seeing some blue and purple and violet. We'll see how much that pops up because they often will color code these so-called diseases with their calling card colors. All right, here we go. This was the story that really landed South Carolina in the headlines. And we're going to break this down. We'll read between the lines here. The push to review religious vaccine exemptions after teacher allegedly nearly dies. I'm glad they put in the word allegedly. 430 cases related to outbreak. You see that fear mongering, the flu mongering, the measles mongering. A little bit later in the broadcast, we're going to look at exactly what the measles are. I had them. I had the chicken pox and I had the mumps, and I'm still standing. And how the measles could actually be a preventative condition that will help you fend off more deleterious illnesses down the road. I'm not even going to call measles an illness or a disease. It could just be a condition, a collection of symptoms. So we're told here on January 13th, in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, that the cases of measles continue to spread, with state health leaders reporting more than 100 new cases in just the last few days. Yeah, so what? And what of it? State health officials report 124 new cases since last Friday, bringing the total related to the outbreak to more than 430. More than 400 people are currently quarantining. There you go. They're pushing the quarantining again. Now, there is a longer article that I have for you on my Substack, peggyhall.substack.com, and this was published in on a website, and it was also a news station, a local news station. Tim Smith stood up for his wife Tuesday night at a Spartanburg District 2 school board meeting. His wife is a teacher's assistant who has worked in the district for 14 years. Smith claimed that a child exposed his vaccinated wife to measles. All right, hang on, time out, everybody. Did you catch that? His vaccinated wife was exposed to measles by a child. Now, there's no name of the child. There's no way of determining, was this child actually examined by a medical doctor? Did the medical doctor indeed conclusively conclude that this child and no other person caused this woman to get sick? Is it possible that she had gone to the bank earlier that day, or she had gone to, I don't know, the drive-thru at McDonald's, or any number of things, that any number of circumstances where she could have been exposed to someone who had a contagious disease? And I'm putting those in quotation marks because there is no scientific proof that that is how disease or illness occurs anyway. So I just want to put that on the table for those of you that might be new to my channel and you don't realize that I've been exposing the fraud, fakes, and phonies with all of this hogwash since 2020. So the husband said, one of your fundamental responsibilities at this board right here is to make sure that our kids and the faculty at this school are safe. I'm going to ask you to do so. Well, this is where the state senator, Josh Kimbrell, jumped into the fray. And he said, I think we're going to have to revisit what religious exemptions are in Spartanburg County. We're at a crisis level. In other words, he was drawing the conclusion that it was the students whose parents put forth exemptions for their children, and therefore these children were carrying these deadly diseases and passing them on to the vaccinated. So let me see if I've got this straight. The wife was vaccinated for measles with a vaccine that apparently didn't work, and the husband wants the children who are unvaccinated to get vaccinated with a vaccine that doesn't work to protect someone who is already vaccinated. Friends, you might know the parallel or the analogy that I came up with: wearing a raincoat to keep others dry. I mean, think about it. I made a couple of notes here. So, an extension of this flawed premise of you have to wear a raincoat to keep others dry is that even if someone else is wearing a raincoat, their raincoat won't keep them dry unless you're wearing one. That's right. The others who are vaccinated, it won't work unless you're vaccinated too. And a further absurd notion is that you have to wear a raincoat to protect other people who can't wear a raincoat, or who have a raincoat and for some reason that raincoat doesn't keep them dry. Did you catch that? Are you following my drift? That's what we're told about the immunocompromised, that they are unable to get these injections, and therefore you should get them to protect those others. You have to wear a raincoat to keep others dry who can't wear a raincoat. How about don't go out in the rain? If you're concerned about getting some kind of illness, don't go out in public. And there are people who actually live that way. And my heart goes out to them. They may have some kind of condition. There are people whose legs don't work properly and they're in a wheelchair. Should we all be in a wheelchair just because the other person is? Friends, that's the logical extension that they're asking us to do here. So just as an aside, if you feel a headache coming on, please let me know, and I'd be happy to take an aspirin for you. All right. So to reiterate, the man wants children, the unvaccinated children, to be vaccinated against measles with the same measles vaccine that did not protect his wife from getting the measles. Makes perfect sense in that crazy world that they're living in. Yeah, how do you like them apples? So that's exactly what's going on in the state of South Carolina this month. And let's take a look at a couple more of these headlines. And I want to share with you, actually, the public serpent, Josh Kimbrell. Oh, yes, he really deserves the name. So here we have it. Nearly 1,000 have been exposed to the measles. And measles outbreak brings with it echoes of the pandemic. Did you say pandemic? Is that how it's pronounced? I call it hogwash. We are also told that the South Carolina measles outbreak spread to the West Coast. 3 cases happened because there was a contagious family member from South Carolina who went to Washington. So now they're going to make you afraid of traveling and going to airports and making others sick because it's you. You are responsible for other people's health. I don't care for that at all. It doesn't make sense, and I'm going to continue to speak out against it. Now, we're going to take a look at Josh Kimbrell, and let's take a look at his face right there. Let me share my screen. And he's also been making headlines, for all sorts of scandals when he got into political office. Oh, yes, I'll share that with you in just a moment. We're going to finish out the broadcast. Well, in just a moment, I'm going to play the way that he tried to cover his bases after he stepped in it. And what he did is he sent this letter. And I know you can't really read it, so I will read it for you, but I wanted to show you the actual letter. Again, I go to the source. So I am reading this, and he published this on January 13th. And he is writing to the Spartanburg County School District. Dear members, I'm writing to you today regarding the ongoing public health crisis we have in Spartanburg, particularly as it pertains to the measles virus. Due to continued declines in childhood vaccination rates, the number of measles cases in our county continues to rise dramatically. Friends, you cannot draw that conclusion that's the case. There might be more measles cases that are reported. There might be false reports or false tests. So there are a number of reasons why there might be a higher number of measles cases reported. So that is also a faulty premise. He says, I've always been an advocate of individual rights and personal choice. I also place a precious premium on parental rights in how they raise their children. For these reasons, I never have and do not now support COVID vaccine mandates for minors. I think government at every level failed in its outreach regard to the COVID response. You see, friends, he's trying to get you on his side by saying that. And then he says, this being said, I now believe that some folks have overreacted in the other direction and oppose any and all vaccines, even ones that have been tried and true for decades. Did you see what he did? He slipped in the lie. And then he says, while I deeply respect religious liberty and religious exemptions, it reminds me of people that leave comments on my channel. Peggy, I followed you through all of the COVID and you really helped me keep my job, but I can't understand why you're talking about tariffs like this and Minnesota ice and Greenland. They don't like any of my other views, but they really liked my view about the cooties hogwash. He says, the county Spartanburg County is now at an inflection point wherein public health is at risk. As a senator, I believe we must examine public school vaccine policy for communicable diseases like measles and polio. Friends, that has to be looked at as well. There is no evidence for that either. Now, what was interesting is he published that letter on Facebook, and he also had a little preamble. And it's amazing to me. A good old Republican state senator. See why I don't pick political sides? In the good old Republican state of South Carolina. And Josh Kimbrell's making waves because, and in the wrong way, he's saying that, basically parental rights and religious rights, heck, rights in general, they don't matter when it comes to the measles. In fact, he said on his, and I'm going to play this for you, in his Facebook Live after he tried to cover his tracks after he went off the rails, he said, we must balance parental rights and personal choice with public safety. Well, let's take a listen now, shall we?
I released a letter the other day. We started talking about it here on Facebook Live, and then somehow the internet cut out. But ultimately, what I wanted to make clear is I wrote a letter to the District 2 School Board talking about religious liberty exemptions in Spartanburg County for vaccines. I do not support any new legislation. I never have, not planning on doing it now. I've not introduced anything new that would curtail parental rights. I've gotten a lot of messages from both sides of this debate saying, well, please don't take away parental rights. Please don't start issuing vaccine mandates. I have no intentions of doing any of that. Here's what I am asking. In a society, we all have to do some give and take, and we have to understand each other's perspectives. What I have said, and what the letter I wrote to the school board earlier this week, what I ultimately said to them is that there is legislation right now, there's laws in the books that provide for religious liberty exemptions in South Carolina. I support that. I think that's a good thing. Now, that being said, as a Christian myself and a person now only God, I guess, ultimately gets to decide this, but I try to be sincere about my faith every day. I try to read the scriptures every morning, and I love Jesus Christ. I try to live out my faith on a daily basis.
Oh, I forgot to mention, friends, that he has been sued for a $2 million, basically an embezzlement from the company that he started with a business partner. And the business partner sued him for stealing the $2 million and putting it toward his political campaign. And he also had to basically resign from the business. And I believe a court forced him to do that. So I don't know how that is walking in the footsteps of Jesus Christ.
I understand some people may view not taking a measles vaccine as a religious thing. I don't personally. I think most people don't.
Okay, I have to interrupt again. It doesn't matter what he believes. It matters what you believe. It doesn't matter what the school board believes. It doesn't matter what your church believes. It doesn't matter what the Pope believes. It matters what God has communicated to you through the Holy Spirit in prayer if you're a Christian. And if you're not, you are protected by the same exact laws, even if you are an atheist. You do not have to have any religious affiliation. You can have beliefs that are yours alone, that do not follow any traditional recognized religion. You do not have to attend any church. You do not have to have any pastor's letter. You do not have to have attended Vacation Bible School. You don't have to attend a Bible study. You don't have to be a Christian. You can be a Muslim, a Buddhist, as I say, an atheist. You have the right of no consent, regardless of any religious views. So I just want to put that on the table as well.
If you feel that way deeply, I understand that you do. That being said, we are now at the place in Spartanburg County with the highest outbreak in the history, modern history of the county. We are number one in the country, not the state, the country, certainly the state too, but the entire country. We have hundreds of cases, 134 new cases on Monday. So this is becoming a serious problem that's gotten national attention. We have a lot of people that have gotten very sick. Ultimately, I had a call even over the weekend from a gentleman whose wife is a Bowling Springs elementary school teacher who was in a pretty serious condition in the hospital, even during the holidays, and was recently just released. Nobody should be in a position just going and teaching at the school and doing their job that they may be faced with the real possibility of hospitalization, severe illness, or death over people's choices.
Excuse me, but life includes risk. And going to school, she could slip on the floor. She could poke her eye out with a pencil accidentally. She could be in a car accident on the way. Sadly, accidents occur, illnesses occur, and deaths occur. And it will occur for each one of us. Life carries risk. And I, for one, would rather have a freedom-filled life than a restricted slavery type of life, just because a public servant like this self-professing Christian says. And he also said, did you hear that? He believes that most people don't think that objecting to vaccines is a religious issue. That's just absolutely astonishing that he would jump to that wrong conclusion.
So here's what I have said. The letter I wrote the other day to clarify what it means and doesn't mean. I've introduced no legislation to change our existing religious liberty exemptions. But I also think people need to be responsible about what those religious liberty exemptions entail. So the school boards have a great degree of latitude on what they're going to do and what they're going to decide. Here's what I'm saying. If you do not want to vaccinate your child, nobody's planning on forcing you to do it. I'm not going to force you. I've never said that I want to force a parent to make a decision that's against their personal will. But there are going to have to be certain restrictions around decisions that are made publicly as a result.
Gee, sounds familiar, doesn't it? Oh, you don't have to be vaccinated, but you just won't be able to keep your job. Oh, you don't have to get vaccinated, but you can't fly on an airplane. Oh, no, you don't have to get vaccinated, but you can't get medical care. Oh, no, you don't have to be vaccinated, but you won't be able to attend college. You see what they're doing here?
I also believe that we have to protect the broader public health. I'm actually working on a book. Some of y'all may have seen the post I put out the other day about the breakdown of politics in our country and certainly our state. I'm making it mostly about the state, but talking about just kind of what's happened in the post-COVID era, how politics has gotten dirtier, distrust has reigned supreme, things have gotten harder to work with. And I think that the COVID overreach by government was one of the greatest examples of a public policy debacle in modern times. The government massively overreached during COVID. Because of that, though, because the massive overreach and distrust, and deservedly, by the way, the government's overreach and distrust that it earned because of it, a lot of people have overreacted in the other way, right? It's the idea of the equal and opposite reaction. Now, some folks have just said, all right, no vaccines are okay. None are ever going to be good enough. We'll never do any of them. And that's equally bad. Okay.
This is just really astonishing. He's trying to get on people's good side to find the common ground by saying, oh, yeah, the government really overreacted during COVID. Oh, but certainly not over measles. You shouldn't have a reaction to the other extreme saying that all vaccines are bad. This is exactly, now this is controlled opposition. This is someone coming in, pretending that they're on your side, feeding you some half truths, and then slipping in the lies to induce you into behaviors, which is their end goal, the behaviors that they want.
Okay. I have never supported a COVID vaccine mandate, still don't, and think mRNA vaccines are very different, even though that may hold scientific potential long term. And I think it's right for some folks. If you got a COVID vaccine, good for you. If you didn't get one, good for you. That's your choice. COVID vaccines are different than measles vaccines. It's a very different type of vaccine. And I think measles and diseases we eradicated a long time ago are very different than the mRNA COVID vaccine. And so some folks overreacted to the overreaction by the government. And so you have two equal and opposite overreactions that have now led to the single largest measles outbreak in Spartanburg County since basically John F. Kennedy was president.
Oh, did you see his little, I have been noticing the gestures. Have you? This, maybe it's just
eradicated a long time.
Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Not every gesture, color, symbol, number, and so forth is inherently wrong, evil, or bad. I haven't seen him doing too many of the Freemason gestures.
And this is bad. And somebody's going to ultimately die. And we've got to stop this. So I'm not going to propose new legislation to curtail religious liberty exemptions. I've been one of the biggest champions in the Senate since I've been there in the last 6 years for parental rights. I will always support that. That being said, I support parental rights for everybody. And I support protecting kids and teachers and for everybody. And so in this county, the overreach by government during COVID has led to an overreaction by some who don't want to have any vaccines at all. So my letter to the school board in District 2, and I'm going to send similar correspondence to other school boards here, is use your discretion. The law says we can make reasonable accommodations under religious liberty exemptions. That's fine. Use those exemptions when necessary. I'm not going to try to force anybody to go to get a vaccine on their kids they don't want to have. But it very well may mean right now that school boards use their discretion to say that if your child is not vaccinated during an outbreak of measles that's unprecedented in modern times, that your kid's going to learn from home on an e-learning platform.
I have a better idea. Send the children home who are afraid of getting the measles. They're the ones that should stay home on the e-learning platform, Senator.
It may mean some restrictions on some of the sports platforms or extracurricular activities until this epidemic is over. There's a give and take. As my friend, Senator Tom Davis, a good colleague and friend from Beaufort, says all the time, every decision we make in state government, or any government for that matter, is a balancing of rights. You have to take this group's concerns, and find out what's best for everybody, the best that you can.
That's totally different than someone's rights. That's an opinion on something.
I get that anything I do is going to have somebody pissed off. Sorry to be blunt, that's just reality. I will always defend parental rights. I will always defend mom and dad being involved in their kids' lives. I will always fight for religious liberty. I'm also always going to fight for public health. And look, one of the biggest reasons we have serious distrust in public health policy in this state is Dr. Simmer is still there. And I voted against Dr. Simmer last year. And Dr. Simmer and the health department earned a lot of distrust. I get that.
I need to interrupt again because that's another of these narratives is rebuilding trust. So Josh wants to come out as the good guy. You can trust him because he doesn't like the public health officer. But how do you define public health, Josh? Isn't it actually individual health?
I understand that. But ladies and gentlemen, having your kid inoculated against measles is not some kind of, like, in my view, religious liberty violation.
Well, Josh, it is a religious liberty violation if your God-given conscience has told you to not become a human pincushion.
Having your kids inoculated against measles is not the same thing as having a forced vaccination on COVID. Now, if you still choose not to have your child inoculated against measles, that's your choice. But there may be some curtailments that have to ultimately be made by certain school districts for a while during the epidemic, and you can't be mad at them when they do that. So
he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. You don't have to be forced to take a COVID vaccine. That's a religious exemption, but not measles.
We have to protect the rights of moms and dads who don't want to have their kids vaccinated We also have to protect the rights of moms and dads who don't want their kids to go to school and get sick.
How could they get sick, Josh, if they've been vaccinated? Explain me that.
We also have to protect the rights of teachers, like the one I mentioned earlier, who got sick and very well could have potentially died over going to school teaching kids who didn't get vaccinated because their moms and dads didn't want them to.
But wasn't she vaccinated? So does the vaccine work, Josh, or does the vaccine not work? And if it works, nobody needs to care about whether anyone else is vaccinated. And if it doesn't work, well, then why get one?
I know what you're going to say. Some folks will say, well, Senator, if they had the vaccine, it's supposed to work forever. The reality is no vaccine works probably forever. So the reason we haven't had to have people continue to get revaccinated for measles historically is to avoid a measles epidemic. Most counties, they say to avoid an epidemic, you need to be around 95% vaccination rate for kids.
None of that is proven, and it doesn't make sense.
Okay, it's historically, up until really the last year in Spartanburg County, that's where we were. 95% of kids were vaccinated against measles. Now we've dropped to somewhere around 90%, 89%, somewhere in that range. Okay, that's caused now this outbreak.
There's no proof that that vaccination rate has caused an outbreak. Josh, you have no evidence for these claims that you're making.
So historically, folks that were older, more advanced in years, maybe, and by the way, I'm 41, so I don't think 50 is old, so let me be clear about that. But if you got a shot when you were a kid and you're 50 now, that means that shot's a few years old. You haven't normally had to test that because you normally haven't had 500 cases of measles in your county. Now we're starting to see that may not work after 20 to 30 years. So now even folks who were vaccinated as younger individuals are now starting to see that vaccine doesn't always hold when you have it.
So Josh, did you get your adult measles vaccine? I'd like to know.
An epidemic of measles to the degree that we have now. So reality is when you start to get to from 95%.
Yeah, very interesting gestures he's making too.
To 89% vaccination rate, and that number could go lower here, you start to have a real outbreak, and that could affect even people who were vaccinated when they were younger. So we've got to have people balance rights, okay? That's the nature of living in a free society. I support parents.
Excuse me, living in a free society means that you have freedom of choice for your individual choices, your individual rights. No, they don't have to be balanced. That's why it's a right.
Rights, always have, always will. I support religious liberty, always have, always will. I also support the science of vaccines, always have, always will.
The difference is parental rights and religious rights are codified in law. We are a country, a nation that's run by laws, not run by science, Josh.
That I can say there's skepticism on mRNA vaccines. I get that. I share some skepticism there. I think that science needs to continue to develop before we start making that a bigger part of our regimen. I understand that. But measles vaccines have been around for decades. That is tried and true. And I think it's safe and effective.
Are you vaccinated against the measles, Josh? If it's safe and effective, then there's no problem for those who are living in fear of getting the measles to be vaccinated. And those who choose not to, there's no logical reason they would have to protect those who are already vaccinated. I'm going to keep saying it until Josh understands it. I guess I'll be saying it a long time.
And we can't just abandon all vaccine protocols, a great invention of modern medicine.
Oh, wow, Josh. I don't know who fed you these talking points, but you pretty much sound like Bob Kennedy these days.
Because the government overreacted 6 years ago during COVID, so we now overreact the other way. I'm going to balance rights and defend freedom and defend public health.
Can you define public health, Josh? I'd like to have your definition of that. As far as I can see, health is individual.
I can. That's what I promise I will do for everybody in Spartanburg County and across the state. I'm trying my best to live up to every principle I've always believed in and lead as a principled conservative to defend the people I care about. I hope you have a good night. Just wanted to give you that update. God bless you.
Well, there you have it, friends. A lot of interesting comments here. It's South Carolina's very own Brad Hoylman. Who's Brad Hoylman, you ask? Well, he is a former New York State Senator who wanted to create a vaccine registry for adults. Yes, just like there is a childhood schedule, he wants there to be an adult schedule and you would be tracked. Well, people in New York didn't care about that. Oh, my gosh, there's a man dressed like a woman, and there's Brad, and he's pushing the free flu shot clinic. Here are some of the comments about Hoylman being pharma's biggest shill, and it's a complete invasion of privacy and unconstitutional. And no one is taking away your vaccines. Just move to communist China if you want the government to dictate what you put in your body. It appears a deeper look at your pharmaceutical industry ties is needed here. You seem to be ignorant of the movement that is happening in this country and how savvy these parents are to dig deeper to find the root of your rhetoric. Outbreak will burn out, but your actions during it are going to be remembered. It says, wait, so she was vaccinated and got measles? Natural immunity is much stronger and longer lasting. And then Amanda says, no vaccine is 100% effective. Well, then why get one? I mean, people are trying to justify this left, right, and center. Absolutely stunning. And then someone is leaving a comment about the fetal cell tissue that are used in the development of these products. I'm going to end the comments on this one, Tyler and Elizabeth. I will not make mandates. And there has to be public repercussions for those choices does not coexist. The comments are really great. Debbie says there's no give and take when it comes to constitutional rights. All of those who believe a vaccine will keep them measles free should follow their heart and get one. But those who hold deeply held religious objections to vaccines should not be discriminated against and certainly not coerced into taking one, not ever. And then she writes, where there is risk, there must be choice. I have to refute that phrase because was I sharing my screen? If not, I'll have to replay that. But I refute that where there is risk, there must be choice, because there must always be choice. It doesn't matter if something is deemed a risk or not. So here's what's troubling to me. A religious exemption or an exemption based on your own ethical and moral objections, which is basically the same. The law recognizes that the same, or even a medical exemption. But when it comes to your beliefs, right, that's what you think. That's what you believe. The government does not have a right to impose their beliefs upon you. So the law is very clear. You cannot be treated any differently because of your beliefs. Let's say that you are a Muslim or a Jew and you don't eat pork. And there's going to be a potluck lunch and there's going to be some hot dogs served. And there's going to be other things as well. And they say, okay, all the Muslims and all the Jewish staff members or children have to stay outside because there's hot dogs being served. You cannot attend this event. It's kind of a weak example, but I'm trying to make something simple and not that emotional. That's illegal. It's illegal to have the unvaccinated children stay at home and not play sports. And they're the ones that have to do the e-learning. So the ones that are afraid, they're the ones that should stay home and they're the ones that should do the e-learning. All right, I will leave that for you. What I want to share with you, just a last couple of things here. And let's take a look. I mentioned that this senator was sued for stealing, or they put it diverted. He diverted $2 million in funds. Yeah, that's stealing it, as this one says. South Carolina Daily Gazette. He was accused of stealing $2 million. And apparently he was running for governor, or will be running for governor, but he's a state senator right now. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you was this. We're going to take a look at the vaccine itself. So this comes from a website called physiciansforinformedconsent.org. And I'll have a link for you in my Substack, peggyhall.substack.com, where you can get the write-up for this with a few additional details. So measles vaccine was introduced in 1963. The decline in the deaths from measles already was on the decline, as you can see from this chart. So way back, I'd say maybe 1935, there's a little spike, and then it had been on the decline since basically the earlier part of last century, and it continued to decline all the way until that vaccine was introduced. Now, what's interesting is that, as I say, I had measles as a child. You probably did as well. Measles is a common childhood condition. It typically lasts about 10 days. It often starts with a cough, a runny nose, eye irritation, and fever. And then the last few days are when the rash sets in. And more evidence is showing that these childhood conditions, like the measles, like the mumps, chickenpox, again, I'm not going to label them as illnesses or diseases. I'm just going to call them conditions. They have beneficial effects down the road, such as preventing more debilitating conditions in adulthood. So Physicians for Informed Consent talks about studies, and there are links to these, that naturally acquired immunity from a measles infection is linked to a reduced risk of different kinds of cancer and other milder things like hay fever, eczema, and asthma. And there's also a lower risk of mortality from heart disease in adulthood. So I thought that was very interesting. Can a child die from the measles? Yes, but it's extremely rare to suffer permanent disability or death from the measles in the United States. And remember, a child can die. I mean, anybody can die from anything, from, slipping in the tub, being in a car accident. A child can fall off a swing set. All these things are tragic, but it does happen. Risk is a part of life. And sadly, some children are going to succumb to some of these conditions. But is this the rationale for insisting that other children be forced to endure unwanted injections of poisons into their bodies just to placate other fearful parents? You probably agree with me and you'll say no, a resounding no. So only about 0.01% of measles cases are fatal in the United States. Not 1%. Not point, not, it's 0.01%. All right. We looked at the vaccine being introduced after measles deaths were already on the decline. The measles vaccine is not safer than measles. So again, Physicians for Informed Consent has educational materials for you to look at. And in 1963, the measles vaccine was given on its own. And I understand there's a push toward doing that again now because it has been linked with other vaccines. So you would get the MMR, the measles, mumps, and rubella. I didn't get that. I got the diseases. I don't recall. And my mom is no longer alive, and I don't have any record of any immunizations, as they were called, or inoculations back in the day. So the manufacturer's package insert contains information about the ingredients, the adverse reactions, and the evaluations. And in that insert, it says the MMR2 vaccine has not been evaluated for carcinogenic, right? That's cancer causing, or mutating potential or impairment of fertility. The risk of permanent injury and death from the MMR vaccine has not been proven to be less than that of measles. So what do you think is going to happen next? What I think is that this is another push. I feel like it's just testing the waters so that the powers that shouldn't be, meaning Big Pharma in this case, and the other public serpents like Josh Kimbrell, who knows who's bankrolling him or if he just thinks this is a popular position. But I think they just want to see how the public will react, kind of back in the cooties hogwash days. Thankfully, there are stronger safeguards in place now with recent court rulings reaffirming the religious rights of children and the parents who are making those decisions for their children, specifically in educational settings. So I don't think this is going to go anywhere anytime soon. What say you?